Hello and welcome to Coding Bootcamp's Intro to the Python Programming Language Project's Companion to the course that I ran for Coding Bootcamps. Might want to check that out, codingbootcamps.com. This project's companion will talk about 4 different videos. The one we're going to be working on today will be students. So be sure to check out the other ones. But for now, let's talk about students. All right, so let's look at the code. Well, first let's talk about what we want to do. All right, so we've got a CSV file that contains information about students in elementary and middle school. It looks something like this. And we've got their age and their hobby and their grade and their school. And so we want to load the file and we want to perform 7 different tasks for this data. So first we want to find the students that have the same hobby, because each one has a hobby. We want to find all the students named Jack. We're going to randomly add, well, the gender is now in the file, so we're randomly going to add enrollment. For each student. So whether they're enrolled or not. And then we're going to flip it. So if they were enrolled, then they're going to be not enrolled. And vice versa. Then we're going to calculate the average invariance for each student. For each school, actually. And the average invariance for each sex. So average invariance for males and then average invariance for the females. And finally, we're going to find all the boys who love fishing. Okay, so with that in mind, let's get into the code. Now the code is, this program is like 122 lines. And it's broken up into all the sections. So what we want to do is, during our code here, we're going to use these 4 different libraries. And all 4 of these are included in the standard library. And that means that they're not included in the Python executable, but they are included in the Python executable via the bootloading of the environment we're running, like the interpreter, for example. It will automatically load it will load the standard library. But if you see this keyword tuple, we don't have to import tuple. It's automatically included because it's a built-in. CSV is included with the distribution of Python, but the standard library packages have to be imported manually. We could also install packages like NumPy or something like that, and then we could also import that. But these packages don't have to be installed because they're included in the standard library. They just have to be simply imported. So we have a CSV module which reads and writes CSV files. We got a random generator, so it can generate random things for us. We have statistics, which we're going to use the default dictionary. Well, that's in the collections actually, and can see there's a counter in there, order dict, although in Python 3.7 order dict is now a language requirement. So now let's get to the code. Alright, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to create this dd variable, which is actually going to be a shortcut for our default dict class. So we can create a default dictionary, which is and then we give it the factory. So whenever we reference something inside the dictionary, it will automatically be, if it's not defined, whatever it is as we supply as the factory. So for example, a list, we can just use the list without ever declaring it as a one of the elements inside the dictionary. We'll see this as we go. So that's dd. Now let's read the student's data. That's the first thing we're going to do, read the student's data. And we're going to use our CSV module, and we're going to use the dict reader. So what it's going to do is it's going to pull out all of the data in our CSV. It's going to pull out, so for the first one, it's going to get all of the, it's going to use this as by default as the field names, and then it's going to say, okay, for the first one, we're going to say name equals William, school equals high, age equals 17, hobby equals soccer, grade, he gets a B, and he is a boy. So once we open our file, we're going to pass it to the dict reader, and then at the end we're going to create a tuple of all of the dictionaries, which will be like a little mini database. So the first element in the tuple will be the first row of our database, and then all of the fields inside will be the columns. So you know, tuple is just like a list, but it's quote quote immutable. All right, so with that in mind, the students now contains the data. We're going to look at this briefly here, just show you exactly what's in here. But I'm going to run through the code quickly, and then we're going to see it in action. So we have some print statements here, and we're going to set hobbies equals, this is a dictionary. Actually, this is a set comprehension. So sets also use curly braces, just like dictionaries, but without the key value, just the key, as it were, or actually just the value. So it's going to be a set, which is non-repetitive list of hobbies, students' hobbies. So the comprehension uses a loop, and it will loop through all of the students, creating a temporary variable called student, which we want to pull out the hobby. So for all the students, we want to create a set of all of the student hobbies. So this hobbies will be, for example, soccer, hiking, fishing, fishing. Get the idea. We'll see that in a second. We're going to print something else out, and then we're going to enter a loop. We're going to loop through all of the hobbies, and we're going to print out the hobby, and we're going to title it so that it's just title case, first letters capitalized. So we're going to print out the hobby and then a dash, and then we're going to print out, we have another comprehension here. Now this time it's a list comprehension because it has square brackets. So the loop is going to loop through all the students, creating a temporary variable called student. Going to loop through all the students, and if the hobby is equal to the current hobby that we're looping through on the main loop. This is a for, not an or. So we're looping through all the students, and if the hobby is equal to our current hobby, then we are going to print the name. All right, so that's this print statement here. And then we are done with our first task, our first problem, as it were. Problem solved. All right, so we're going to get on to the second one. And the second one is going to find the students whose name is Jack and output his data. So we're going to loop through all the students, and if name is Jack, then we're going to print the data. Print that student object. We could also use a filter to filter down using a lambda function. And then we have to use this tuple to print the filter results, because it's a filter object, so we have to pull it out into an iterable, a viewable iterable. But this is not as pretty. This is not as readable as, because code is read far more than it's written, far more often than it's written. You write it once and read it many times. So this is way more beautiful. So that is number 2. Number 3, we need to add enrollment. So whether the student's enrolled or not. So we're just going to loop through all the students, and we're going to say the enrollment, we're going to create a new entry here in the dictionary. Our dictionary, we're going to see all this, don't worry, we're going to see exactly what all this looks like. So in this dictionary, the database row, as it were, we're going to, if enroll doesn't exist, we're going to create it and set the value to a random choice. So we're going to say, we're going to pick randomly from true and false. And we're going to say, oh, is he enrolled or not? And then we're going to print it off. So we're going to print the student name, and then, comma, we're going to print is enrolled if the student enrollment is true, or else it's going to print nothing. So we're going to say William is enrolled or nothing. All right, so that's number 3. Now, number 4, we're going to reverse the enrollment. So for all the students, we're going to say, we're going to reverse it right here. So student sub-enrollment is equal to not student sub-enrollment. So if this is true, then now it's going to be false. So now we are going to print off the student name and was enrolled. If it was enrolled, then we're going to say now he's not enrolled if he was enrolled. That's the basic idea. So number 5, moving on to number 5, a little bit bigger, number 5. So we are going to print the average and the variance of each school. So we're going to write a helper function here called getScore, which basically just says if it's an A, we're going to assign that an integer value so we can work with numbers. So B is a 3.5 and C is a 3. And anything else is a 2. But I think our data only has A, B's, and C's. So that's a helper function. Let's just remember that's there. So now we are going to create a new variable called school scores, and that is our, remember, our default dictionary. And we're going to pass it the list constructor as a factory function. So whenever we access something inside of DD, we're going to get a list. So we're going to loop through all the students again, and we're going to say the school scores sub, well, maybe this was high school, so it'd be high, or elementary, or middle school. We're going to add into our list. See, we're not creating this. Nowhere do we say, okay, normally we would have to, if we didn't have a default dict, if this was just a regular dict, we would say, like an empty dict, we would say school scores sub school equals, now this is an empty list. But we don't have to do this if we make a default dict. So it's just a little easier, a little cleaner if you know what this thing is. So we're going to append to this list, and the default dict, remember, like we just said, it's going to create the list if we don't have it already, which the first time through we will not. So it's going to create this list and append to this empty list the get scores of the student. So if the student has a B, he's going to get a 3.5. That'll be the first element in the list. All right. So then we're going to loop through all those scores, and we are going to print off the school, so high school, and we're going to print off the list that we just accumulated. Now we could do this in a fancy little list comprehension, but it's way easier to read this. Way easier to understand that. So then we are going to loop through all of the school scores again, and we're going to print off the data. So first here we're just listing them. We're not trying to break any land speed records with fancy, reading this only once. We can read as many times as we want. It's not going to take milliseconds. So we're just going to print off all the schools in the list so we can see them. We don't really need this for our project, but it helps to see the data. So this is what we want to have in our project here. We want to loop through the school scores again, and we're going to print out the items. We're going to loop through the items, which is going to give us the key and the value. That's what items does. So we're going to loop through the scores, and we're going to create total and account and average and variance, and then we're going to print them off. Now we can talk for a minute about this fancy thing in Python 3.6 what we got, which I waited for a long time, because otherwise you would have had to done some other more funkier kind of formatting here. So if we precede this a string literal with the letter F for format, then inside we can use the curly braces as a variable separator. A variable would be like a declaration of a variable. And we can, well, the use of the variable. So we're going to print off here the school variable. And we are going to have, and we say colon, and we're going to say it takes 13 spaces. So we're going to pad it with 13 spaces, with how many spaces it needs to be 13 characters wide. So that we're doing this in a loop. So each of our lines we print out are going to align vertically. And the same thing with count. It's going to be right aligned. Left aligned is the default for strings, but at a number we can right align. That's what this greater than is. So we're going to have the count be right aligned 4 spaces. Total aligned will be right aligned 7 spaces, and with a 1 digit after the decimal point. Average will be right aligned 8 spaces with 2 places after the decimal point, and variance will be right aligned 9 spaces with 3 places after the decimal point. All right, so that's number 5. Now moving on to number 6. We want to calculate the average of grades by sex, so male and female. So like we had school scores as a default dictionary. Now we got sex scores, so males and females. We're doing the same basic thing we did before, but we're going on the sex of the student, and we are going to say sex takes 2 places, so it's M or F, and then we're going to put the scores. Pretty simple. That's the same thing we did before, just to give us our data, and we're going to do the same thing with printing off the variance and average and total and count. All right, so the last thing we're going to do is going to print boys who love fishing. So we're going to loop through the students, and we're going to say if it's a male and he likes fishing, then we're going to print his name. Pretty simple. Now, let's see this baby in action. All right, so let's say we want to run Python student.py. All right, now let's go over our terminal and do it because we're going to need some more space here. All right. All right, there it just went by. Did you see it? All right, so it's going to be hard to read, but we just want to just get a brief look at it. How big do we need it here? Is that good? All right, so let's look at the data. All right, so we're running our program here. Python, we're going to run the program. And problem 1, same hobby. And actually just for this, I hate to keep flipping back for you. Sorry about that here. Maybe it's a little bit easier to see as we're running through. Printing same hobby. Right, so print same hobby. And then we say hobbies. And then we print off the hobbies in our loop here. So that's the hobby title. Hobby, and when we title, we capitalize the title, capitalize the first letter, and then our list comprehension to print off all the list of all the hobbies. So there's our list comprehension, printing off all the hobbies for all the students that have that particular hobby, if hobby equals hobby. So number 2, find all the Jacks. Right? If the name is Jack, we just print the data. That one's pretty simple. And there's this one guy, that's his data. This is the next guy, another Jack. So there's one Jack in each school, one in high school, one in middle school, one in elementary school. Number 3, we're going to assign a random enrollment. So we print off student name, and then if he's enrolled, we say is enrolled. So William, nothing. Susan, nothing. Sarah is enrolled. Robert, nope. Jack is enrolled. Patricia's enrolled. Michael, nope. Mary's enrolled. Linda's enrolled. Karen, nope. That's basically it. Number 4, we're going to reverse it. Remember, so enrollment equals not enrollment. That's the simple data there. Then we print it off. So William was not enrolled, now is enrolled. Susan was not enrolled, now is enrolled. Sarah was enrolled, now is not enrolled. So that's all the way through the list there. Number 5, the average and variance. All right, here is our average and variance. So we have our helper function here. We create our school scores and then we print them out, which is right there. So we print off scores, the word scores, and then we print, see, we're right aligned 11 spaces. So this is right aligned 11 spaces there. Same with them all, they're all right aligned 11 spaces. So then we print the list, which our DD created. And there's the list for all the scores. So now when we go to print off our data, we have the scores there for us to be able to see. And we have 5 students in high school, is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5 students in high school, 7 students in middle school, and 8 students in elementary. There's their totals, the average scores, and it looks like the young kids are doing pretty good, and high school kids are doing good. Everybody's doing pretty well in school, just by the grades. It's easy to tell by grades, but grades don't really give you the full value of the student, do they? So finally, we print the variance. Okay, and number 6, we do the same thing with the sex of the child. So male and female. There's a list of all the males. There's a list of all the females. And there are our numbers. And finally, a list of the boys who like fishing. That's the list of boys who have fishing as their hobby. Now, let us go back to our terminal. And first, boy, I'm really switching around here, aren't I? Let's start off by going into our debugger here. All right? And we'll see if that works. So now we will run the program again, but this time we entered our debugger at line number 11. All right, which is, now we enter it here, and our debugger should tell us that we are going to pause on line number 11. All right, so we run it. We are on line number 11. And at the students line, so we can list that. We can say, we're currently about to execute line number 11, but we stopped after line number 6. And let's print off DD. What's that look like? It's an empty default dictionary. All right. So we have our imports here. We can figure out where we imported things from. Right? We can say CSV. We can figure out where random is from. We can figure out where, and so on. All right. So now we're going to be at line 11. We're going to be executing the students. So let's say next, and now we can print students. So students is a tuple, and we can say students. We'll say type of students is a tuple. So we'll say print off students sub 0, and that is our ordered dictionary. But now in the new Python, actually I think it was Python 3.5, dictionaries became ordered by default, but that was a C specific implementation. So now it's language specific in 3.7. So if we can, it's easier to look at our dict here if we make it a dict. So the first student, right, we print student number 0 at index 0. We say his name is William, his school is high, his age 17, his hobby is soccer, his grade is B, and his sex is M. He's a boy. Okay, so now let's look where we are. We just executed line number 11. Now we're going to execute line number 14. So let's go down to, let's do that. We print that off. Print a blank line. You can see it there. Now we're setting hobbies. So there's our hobbies. And now for hobby in hobbies, we're going to sort the hobbies actually, and then we're going to loop through them, and we're going to print them off. Where are we now? So we printed them off. Right here. So we printed the hobby, and there's all the guys that have baseball as the hobby. Jack, David, and Charles. So that is our hobby title, and then our dash, and then our list comprehension prints off the list of those guys. So now we're going to loop through so we did that one. So let's see, we're on line number 23. All right, so we're going to the next hobby. So now we have a new hobby. So the first one was baseball. So now we're on fishing. And now we can set a breakpoint. Let's see here. We set, we'll go to, so we'll set a breakpoint for 30. And then we'll continue. Now we're at line 30. So we don't have to go through the loop. Sit there, all the hobbies. Oh, there was only 3. So there, the rest of the hobbies are printed out. We already printed baseball, but now it'll print the other 3, fishing, hiking, and soccer. And now we are at our breakpoint at line 2, at line 30. And let's go into our loop for student and students. Now we're inside the loop, and let's print off student. William again, he's the top of the list. So now we're looking for all the Jacks. So we could, pretty simple, you know, if it's Jack, we're going to print his name. So we could also get this filter now, as you can see, it's a filter object, right? So Jax equals the filter object. So we could say print a tuple, or it could be a list of this lambda function. That's a function inside of an expression. So student, because we already have student defined, so we're going to give that to our lambda function, and the lambda is going to say, well, if the student, and we could call this anything we want, because now we're in the function. This is our function parameter we're going to call s. We're going to say if the student name is Jack, then we're going to include it, or else if it's not, we're going to filter it out. And we're going to pass that lambda all of the elements one at a time from students. Unexpected end of file. Because that was our list. So there's the end of our filter. Actually, this is the end of our list. Oh. Function object is not lit, so we're going to take a list of let's just take the lambda function for now. So we're getting our lambda function and our students. So we forgot to filter them. So we were going to filter our students, and we get back a filter object. I'm going to try to save us some memory if we don't need them all, but we do. So now they're filtered, and so we can say, instead of print, we can say pretty print the dict of that of the list. Pretty print. We could just pretty print the list. So we're going to see that the first Jack is, there's 3 Jacks here, so got Jack in high school, Jack in middle school, Jack in middle school, and Jack in elementary. But we're basically doing this by hand, but this is so much prettier for reading the code. The data should be the same at the end. Alright, so now we are, let's print a break. Let's have a new breakpoint to get out of this loop. We don't want to have to go through all of those things one at a time. Let's break out and go to problem number 3. And that's line 41. And we'll continue until 41. And now we are print problem 3. Okay, so next. There, it printed it for us. And it's going to print again. And let's go into our students again. For now, we're going to assign enrollment. So let's go down into our loop there. Okay, so now we are inside of our loop. Student, that's what of course, William is top of the list. And if we look, can we say pp dict? Because pp of student, oh, pretty print is getting smarter all the time. Okay, so we have no enrollment in there. So now we're at line 45, and we're going to set the enrollment. Or if it was already something else, we are now going to set it to the random choice of true or false. So let's execute that. So we did that. Now let's do our pretty print for our student. And now we can see it tacked on enrollment on the end. And since it's an ordered dict, which all dicts are now, you can see it added to the end. Alright, so it's going to do that for, no, let's see. So now William is enrolled. So go get another student and pretty print Susan. Oh, she's not enrolled. So it's just randomly enrolling them. So now let's break out to 50. And so there's a list of all enrolls, not enrolls. And we are going to reverse it now. So if they were enrolled, they're not enrolled. So let's go into our loop. Now reprint student, and of course it's William again, who is enrolled. And hope you're following along here. This arrow here, you know, it points at the line we're at. Is everybody following that? Maybe you can rewatch the whole thing I've done here in the debugger with knowing that. Should have mentioned that in the beginning. So we're at line number 54. So we already have student now. We already executed this line 53. So we can pretty print student, which we just did above. So that's William. And now, so student enroll is true. So now it's going to be not enrolled. So if we print off student enroll, it'll be true. Now, if we're going to execute line 54, boom. Now let's print it off, and now it's false. All right. So now it's going to print it off, and you can see how the rest of that works there. So let's continue with line number 66. So there's everybody enrolled, not enrolled, enrolled, not enrolled, enrolled. Christopher was not enrolled, now is enrolled. Charles was not enrolled, now is enrolled. And so on. Right, so we are at line 66, and we're going to, we have a our get score helper, and for students, school scores. We want to get school scores. Right, so let's go down to line 77. And let's say we're going to execute that. So now we're at, let's go to the next line. So now we are at line 79. So student, let's say school, is high. All right, so we're going, of course, we're at William again. And now let's print our student scores. So this student has a score of 3.5 because he's got a grade of B, and our helper function says it's 3.5. So now we are going to loop. Let's go back to the top of our loop. So we executed line number 79. Now we're looping back up to line number 77. So that means we should now have something in school scores. Right? And, well, there's multiple schools. So now it is a dictionary, really. So it's really just a dictionary, but it's this default dictionary, which has the list factory. So we have now one, for high school, we have one entry. That's William's B grade as a 3.5. All right, so let's go through all those, and we'll break at 81, continue there, and we'll print those. I think, how do you clear here? How do you clear a breakpoint? Break 77, does that clear it? How do you clear? Maybe clear 77? And not sure how to clear. Was that a clear? 77 out of range. Disable. Don't want to have to go through all those. No. Disables a breakpoint. So disable 77. Out of range. Oh, breakpoint 7. It told me that it's got a number. Why can't it just be the line number? So now we should be at breakpoint 7. Disabled breakpoint 7 at line 77. Disable 6. Disable 5. And how do you list all our breakpoints? We can say list no, disable. Nice commands. There's other debuggers that seem a little bit better than this thing, but this is the easiest, I think, to spin up. So list breakpoints, we don't know. So disable 4, 6. So we say break at 81. Now we continue. So now we're at 81. So we're going to print off the list. So let's disable 81. Disable 1. Now we're going to, let's break at 86. Continue. So it printed off our list here. So there's all of our scores. There's Williams and all of the rest of the students. So now we're going to print the, let's get into it. For school, let's get into it. So now we are, so for the first guy, that's Williams, I think, right? PP student. Now actually we're reading school score, so the first one is, oh, that's the last one from the previous loop. Now we're not able, students not even being used here anymore. Now we're at school scores, right? So schools scores is this dictionary, and so we're going to print so for school and scores. So the school there is high for the first one, and the scores is that list. So we are at line 88, and so let's go to down to line right before the print. Now we have a total, we have a count, we have an average, and we have a var, and then we print it off. So let's skip down to line, and we'll do the whole loop. So let's skip down to line 96, and it printed it off our data there. So now we are on number 6, and the same thing with the scores for the students, and then we can skip down to line 119, and that's basically it. That's it. So we can just look at that beautiful list of data and formatted data. But that's it. This is a long video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and make sure that if you want to learn more about Python programming language as an introduction, we have a hangman game and a dice game and a simple reverse. That's a beginner. We just did students, but yeah, come back for the others, and we'll see you on the next video. Thanks, guys.